Fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. This video deals with Alexander Zverev's racket and his string tension, because one clip that was shared by Eurosport from the Australian Open final, he tends to have these routines where he wants a racket every third changeover or something like that. I will talk to some stringers on tour and confirm how often he wants them, but he's quite particular with his stringing and demands a lot from the stringers. That's what I heard from many stringers on tour that has worked with Zverev. It seems to work well for him though, as considering he's now been in 3 Grand Slam finals, yet to cross the finish line, but I'm sure that will come at some point. But there are some interesting things around his new racket that he's playing since the end of 2024, and now that he's really gone down quite significantly in tension in terms of his strings. And I've looked back in the history of the Zverev's string tension as far as I have stats on that, and he's been down before, but never this low. And this is kind of getting towards Manarino levels. Not quite, you know, Manarino strings like 10-11 kilos. And Zverev, he asks for 15.9 kilos in the mains. He strings their head hawk touch, and 16.9 kilos for the natural gut, that's Babla VS touch. So that's a very low string tension for a hybrid setup. If you're using a full bed of poly, you've seen a few players try to go down in tension to get the maximum effect from the poly, but it's very rare to see this low a tension for a gut hybrid. In 2024, he started dropping. In Halle, he was down 20.1 kilos in the mains and 21.1 kilos in the crosses. And you might ask here, does it make a difference to string 100 grams more or less? If you ask, I would say 99% of the stringers on tour, you would get a no. But if you ask Alexander Zverev, you will obviously get a yes, and he is the guy who's playing. So, and he's the only player, as far as I know, on tour that's wants the stringers to adjust by hectos. It could be in his head, like with many tennis players, but yeah, he's gonna keep doing it. He's done it for quite a while. I checked back to 2021, and he already strung there like 23.3 kilos and 22.3 kilos with the same strings. I don't think he's changed strings that much. That's the setup he's been using for a long time. His racket is new though. It's the head gravity tour mold instead of what he used to use, which was the head gravity pro. And if we're going to get into pro stock codes, you know, there are many manufacturers, they have some kind of code to illustrate the racket they play with. Most pros play with older rackets, and they don't change every 2 years like the manufacturers often want us to believe. They obviously want to sell more rackets, and they want them to endorse the new racket, while the pro obviously wants to play with the racket he's used to and has the most muscle memory with, because otherwise that would be completely insane. So he plays now with a new mold. He used to play with that TGT 344.3. The .3 means the layup here. The TGT 344 means the mold, which is the head gravity pro mold. That's what he used to play. His specs are pretty much unchanged. 343 grams strung weight, so this is with strings. 33 centimeter balance. That's also 2 points head light, and a 360 swing weight. So a pretty high swing weight in the Rafa territory, Novak territory. Some pros prefer being high in the swing weight territory, but overall we've seen swing weight go down. We talk about this in the podcast with Patrice Chabrel from Technifiber, how on average rackets are getting lighter and swing weight points are going down on the pro tour. So the change he has made is not in the specifications. The specifications are, as far as I'm aware, the same. Simon Seidler, our contributor, wrote an article on tennisnerd.net about this based on what he got from a German interview. It's now the Gravity Tour 100 mold, so not the Gravity Tour 98, which is a very, very beloved by reviewers and by play testers. New racket coming from Head. The Head Gravity Tour 98, which has a 69th pattern. It's not that racket, it's the outgoing Gravity Tour 100. This can be a slight letdown for Head, of course, because they are not gonna sell the Gravity Tour 100 anymore, as far as I know. At least it's discontinued for the time being, and now Zverev is playing that one. And I guess maybe they will have to bring it back, or just pretend that he plays the Gravity Pro like before. It's a tricky one. It's very tough for the manufacturers to keep up with what their pros are doing and their preferences. But the Gravity Tour 100 mold is called TGT 341, and the layup here is 0.2. Still an 18-20 pattern, but the 22mm beam should give him a bit more power. He says he gets more spin. Maybe it's because of the the way they drill the holes or something, that it feels like there's a bit more pocketing or a longer dwell time in the string bed. I think the pattern is pretty much the same if I remember correctly, but it does feel like he gets a bit more spin with the thicker beam version, the Gravity Tour, and that's why he seems to like it. He doesn't have the same pinpoint precision, especially when going flat, as with the Gravity Pro, but it's always a compromise based on what you want. And as you can see with his serve, it hasn't really taken anything off the serve. Maybe it's even better than before. He's been serving exceptionally well in all the end of 2024 and now also at the Australian Open, and his serve is key for his game to be good. One thing you can argue about this low tension is that it can lead obviously to some pushing, you know, that you're not really confident enough to strike fully on the ball and go for your shots 100%. For some players who have shorter swings, who like to manipulate the ball a bit more, Mandarino is a good example here. A low tension is not a problem. They're handsy players, they can adjust and shorten their swings, and they play a little bit more loosely. And while in Zverev's case, I feel like he's more of a metronomic player. He needs to have his rhythm. He's building long points. He's very, very consistent, and he backs all this up by a huge serve. Very, very efficient game style when it works. But sometimes you can see him drop that consistency a bit. Could see that against Sinner, for example. I mean, he's obviously doing so many things right, being in the Australian Open final, but against Sinner, you could see that there's a bit of a consistency issue. Everyone has that against Sinner these days. He is the world #1 for a reason. I think many players of all levels should consider dropping their tension a bit, especially considering the conditions and so on, to protect their arm. Obviously, you're getting more pocketing, you're getting free depth on your shots. There's a lot of benefits if you're playing polyester strings, especially, to dropping the tension a bit. But it's not going to be for everyone, and you're going to miss a little bit of that pinpoint precision. If you're a player who really values that, or hates when your shots are going long and when you're making some mistakes that are inexplicable, at least to you in the moment, I think maintaining your tension or adjusting it only ever so slightly is a good idea. But if you're a player who's not that sensitive, who can manipulate the ball, or a bit of a magician with your hands and so on, I'm sure you can play at quite a low tension and still retain control thanks to the control properties of the polyester string. Depends a little bit on the polyester string as well. Head hook touch in this case is quite controlled string, but it's quite a contrast here in this case, that we have Alexander Zverev playing with a 360 swing weight and with a very low tension. So he's going to get a lot of power from this racket. And then we have Jannik Sinner, on the other hand, playing with a lower swing weight, similar thickness beam. They're both 28 kilo tension. So here we go high in tension, like 61 pounds, while Zverev is being really low. Interesting contrast. They have different techniques, different styles, different ways to strike the ball. But it's always fascinating to look at pro player gear, especially if there are changes, and see how it affects them on the court. It adds a little bit of spice to watching pro tennis. To me, it's always been that way, and that's why I enjoy making these videos. And I hope you enjoy watching them. If you want more info like this, check out tennisnerd.net, where we have loads and loads of articles. We have a consultation if you're lost in the racket jungle, and lots more. That's it for today. Have a nice day now, and don't forget to play some tennis.